Thank you. Every year in Maine, several communities from across the state receive the AARP Community Challenge Grant, and they really make a huge difference in the communities that receive these grants, and we hear from them all the time. And today in the studio, we have one of our recipients from 2003 and as one of our panelists, and that is Jason Lamoreau, and he is the Recreations Director and the Older Services Coordinator for the town of Bowdoinham, Maine. He led the town's effort last year for their 2003 AARP Community Challenge Grant Project. And I'm really excited to have him here and to talk to him. Jason, thank you so much for being here. And
No.
yes, really good to have you here. So I really want to kind of get a sense of, the why and the how and the who behind your grant last year. So I have a couple of questions for you to learn more about your project. So to start us off, could you tell us a little bit more about the town of Bowdoinham itself and why the town decided to apply for the AARP Community Challenge Grant in 2023? And what was the challenge that you were or your community was wanting to solve? So the whole chunk of questions. So if you want to break them down, that'd be great.
Very good. Yeah. So Bowdoinham's a relatively small community. We are located in south central mid-coast Maine. We're about 15 miles from the coast, a population of about 3,000 people. And we have a very rich farming and art community here. There's not many businesses. It's mostly a bedroom community. So a lot of homes, a lot of larger homes. And our population does contain a lot of older individuals that have lived in their homes for a long time. So we have about 800 of our 3,000 residents are over the age of 65. And many of them have lived in this town, their family, for generations. And I work closely with our age-friendly committee here in Bowdoinham, and their challenge that they brought to me was that folks were having a difficult time remaining in their homes as they aged, and they were having younger family members move in with them to help support in the home. And they knew that I had a construction background. I do have a construction background, and we started talking about the concept of universal design and decided that we would love to develop a universal design guidebook to spread some of the information on universal design to folks in the community to help people be able to live longer lives in their home. And so that's when we decided to reach out and apply for the Community Challenge Grant to help develop this guidebook.
That's great, Jason. Another aspect I think a lot of people don't realize is that each year the AARP Community Challenge Grant funds projects in rural communities across the country, and rural communities such as Bowdoinham. And this year, over 40% of funded projects are in rural areas. And I think that just, speaks to a very responding to a very special need that, that rural communities face. Can you tell us a little bit more about Bowdoinham's housing stock itself? And, and can you also speak a little bit about the access to affordable housing and, to accessible housing in your town? And what are some of the other actions that Bowdoinham has taken to ensure that there are accessible housing options?
Sure. Like I said, there's a lot of families have been in town for a long time. Our housing stock is quite old, actually, especially in the village. There's a lot of older homes. And then as you get out into the more agricultural area, there's a lot of large farmhouses that have been in families for generations. And those houses become less manageable for folks as they age. So our town actually developed a housing action committee to host forums, multiple forums hosted in town to see what sort of challenges folks were faced with and what they would like to see in the future in our town for housing. And it came across loud and clear in those forums that there was a strong desire for some smaller and more manageable homes for families and for older adults in our community. There's a lot of members who would like to downsize and have a more manageable home. However, there's no home available necessarily for them to do that, which again, kind of why we got into the concept of universal design and worked with the housing committee to design this guidebook to help folks as they were developing new homes in town to incorporate some of the concepts of universal design to make them more accessible for folks of all abilities and all ages, specifically in our town for older adults.
Thank you, Jason. The AARP network of age-friendly states and communities supports places to become more livable for people of all ages. We know that. And right here in Maine, we have over 90 communities enrolled in the network. And also our state of Maine is enrolled in the network. Can you tell us more about the universal design that you spoke of earlier and how it plays a role in creating a more age-friendly community where residents can age in place? And you kind of touched on that very briefly in response to my first question. What are some of the key elements of this guide that makes the language more inclusive for older adults?
Sure. So, universal design is a concept of designing a home or making upgrades or repairs to a home to make it more navigable and accessible, livable for people of all ages. We all would like to think that we're able-bodied and going to continue to be able-bodied for years to come, but we never really know. An accident at any point, an illness, our children or a family member could become less abled at any point. So the idea of introducing the concepts of universal design, making things more accessible and easier to use in the home ahead of time or now while you are able to, will certainly help in the future. And sometimes I think universal design tends to get confused a little bit with the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA. A lot of folks are familiar with ADA and not so much universal design. Universal design kind of takes it a step further, where ADA is more for people who aren't able to access real well. I like to use the example of Braille on an office. So Braille labeling on an office building is really beneficial for folks who are visually impaired, but not so beneficial for anyone else who isn't visually impaired. Whereas if you use the example of a sidewalk curb cut, it has the textured rise coming up to the sidewalk, and that certainly helps people who are visually impaired, but it also provides traction for someone who might be using a walker or pushing a stroller. They're usually brightly colored so everyone can see that rise and not trip over it as they're gaining access up onto the sidewalk. So, it's a real simple example that universal design benefits much more people and not such a limited category. And sorry, Noel, I forgot your last question. Could you ask me the last part of that again?
The last part of the question is, what are some of the key elements of this guide that make the language more inclusive for older adults?
Right. So we worked with a plain language specialist on this guidebook, which was really eye-opening to me. I had never gone through that process before. She really helped us bring things back and make it really simple in the fact that there are short, clear sentences in the guidebook. Low syllable words, trying not using long syllables, something that's really easy to understand for everyone who would be reading the guidebook, and not getting into the weeds of technicality and terms that people might not understand. We really worked hard to make it understandable and relatable to everyone. And we also, as part of that, even using some color coding. So if you were to look at a page in the guidebook, we broke it down as 3 different stages you could do in your home. You can make a simple repair, and those were green. It was easy. Go. You can make this simple repair. Then we had an upgrade or a remodel, which was yellow. It's, this is a little more difficult, but you can still do it. And then we went into a full build, something you would do on a brand new construction. And that was red, as in, this is going to be a little more complex, maybe a little more expensive undertaking. And within each page, we incorporated those colors to really break it down into ease. And I think that was really super helpful to make it accessible for everyone.
And that comes across even for someone who was not involved in the design of the project itself. And it's very impressive. The level of language, there's no technical jargon in there, and it's visually very appealing in the sense that you want to learn more. You don't feel cumbered by having to go through that guide. Um, One of the benefits of the AARP Community Challenge grant is that small investments can jumpstart something that's long-term in the community. Now, would you share a little bit more about how this guide has been used by the community so far? And what do you think is the next step for the town in ensuring that its housing serves people of all ages and abilities?
Yeah, so we actually have made great steps with that. We've been able to incorporate this guide in our town office, specifically with our code enforcement officer. The guidebook is being given out with every new building permit application in the town. Folks are receiving this guidebook and being made aware. There's no restrictions or demands to use it, but it's helping to make folks aware of the process and that there are options out there to use. So it's being distributed in our town office, our library, through our food pantry, and any sort of housing forums that we have in the future. Our committee is doing a really good job distributing the guidebook to make people aware of the process. And specifically, since this guidebook was developed, we've had 2 new projects come before our planning board, a 14-unit apartment building and a 6-room assisted living home. And both of these applicants have been presented specifically with this guidebook, and we're looking forward to an opportunity to actually discuss universal design with them further. So we're really excited and hopeful that this is going to have a direct impact on our town in the very near future.
And anything else? And again, I'm not asking you to commit to something, but what's next? Now that you've kind of developed the guide, you're really putting it out there in such an impactful way. If every applicant is getting one of the guides in your community, what do you see as the next step?
I think being able to work with future projects like that was definitely a next step. And then we want to be able to help other communities, surrounding communities, also implement these practices. We've designed this guidebook so that it's replicable to other communities. Although we kept some very specific things to Bowdoinham in the guidebook, those photos or quotes are easily exchanged with another community's, a prominent fixture in their community or a prominent person. And, we're willing to share. We want to help other communities do the same thing in their area as well.
And we've also been in a recent regional community forum where other communities were asking you for the guide and asking if they could steal the ideas. So, Jason, thank you so much for your time today. As you know, we love to feature creative projects like this, and yet creative and yet replicable projects like this. So before we go, would you mind sharing any tips or inspiration to those who are watching this?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, to this guidebook specifically, the best thing I think we did is we incorporated direct quotes from prominent, recognizable community members. And that's been hugely successful in building its popularity. The fact that somebody can flip this open and they see a picture of Kate, our local librarian, everybody loves Kate, and she's providing a direct example of how she used this concept in her home. And I think it makes it super relatable and achievable for folks, the fact that they see someone they recognize and they know using it. So, I think that goes for any project. If you can involve community members who are familiar and they're endorsing it and they're using it, that's really going to help your project be successful.
Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Noel. Thanks for having me.
Many thanks to Noel and Jason for sharing that excellent project in Bowdoinham, Maine.